Here's everything you need to know about Piper Rockelle and her mother, Tiffany Smith, who are the topic of a new documentary out on Netflix right now called Bad Influence: The Dark Side of Kidfluencing. Our story starts off in Georgia in 2007, where Tiffany was living when she was 26 years old and got pregnant with Piper. Now, Piper's dad didn't stick around, which meant Tiffany was raising her daughter on her own. Tiffany started putting Piper into pageants when she was just a toddler, and she actually won her first pageant when she was just 3 years old. She absolutely loved the attention and the fame, and eventually they started posting her on a kind of lip sync app called Musical.ly, which eventually turned into TikTok. She also started posting, or I should say, Tiffany started posting Piper on YouTube when she was only 8 years old. Piper got her big break in 2017 when she and her mother were cast on the show Dance Twins. She also moved to LA in 2017 and she was only 10 years old. This is also when Piper and Corinne became friends. Now, Corinne would later on become one of Piper's squad members, but at this point, she's asked to audition to be a backup dancer on Piper's new show for Dance Twins. Tiffany, Piper's mom, at this point had huge aspirations for her daughter and wanted her YouTube channel to take off. So she would invite Corinne over for sleepovers and then tape things for their YouTube channel. One of the videos that they first uploaded to the YouTube channel had over 1 million views. Right around this time, this man comes into the picture as well. This is Hunter Hill. He was just a kid, and Tiffany recruited him to play a brother to Piper on her YouTube channel. Yes, it was all fake. So Hunter tells a friend that he's actually getting with Tiffany, ends up moving in with Tiffany, becoming her boyfriend, and then completely takes over the production and directing of all of Piper's YouTube channel. At this point, things are starting to really take off for Piper. She gets cast in a show on YouTube, and the show's called Manny, which is about a male nanny. Now, she gets cast to play this preppy kid, and her soon-to-be good friend Sophie ends up getting cast to play this goth child. So the whole thing is on YouTube on a network called Brat, which is basically like the Disney Channel, but for YouTube. The two of these girls had really hit it off, and Tiffany was thrilled. She now had another kid to film on YouTube. So the two of them started making content together, and in 2019, Piper is on a podcast where she calls Sophie her absolute best friend, and they're just 12 years old. Sophie says in 2018 that they were filming and Tiffany realized that Piper's lines were getting cut. Someone else, another character, was getting a bigger role. And Sophie says Tiffany threw an absolute fit, stormed off saying, "You're not doing this to my daughter," and tried to make Sophie leave with her, and Sophie didn't. Tiffany and Piper would go back to Georgia and visit with friends and family, and one of the people that still lived in Georgia was Tiffany's sister, Patience, who she didn't really have a connection with. Now, Patience was married, and her wife had 2 daughters, Claire and Reese. Piper started to connect with Claire and Reese, who actually looked up to Piper because of her YouTube channel and all the fame she had gotten. Tiffany got the idea that she wanted to have a group of friends that would tape with Piper, and she was going to call them Piper's Squad. So she started recruiting kids, including Claire, and also at this time, Sawyer joined up. So the OG squad in 2018 consisted of 8 kids. So we first, of course, have Piper. She's 11 years old at this time. Corinne was 11, Sawyer was 12, Sophie was 11, Hayden was 11, Emily was only 10, Gavin was 11, and Simone was 12. Piper's YouTube channel ends up hitting 1 million followers in just a year and a half. And what Tiffany ended up doing was making all of their YouTube channels connect back into Piper's channel and would send followers. So all of them were gaining a ton of subscribers. Now, what ended up happening is they eventually were so popular, they started even touring. It ended up coming out that these kids were filming around 10 to 15 videos per day for these YouTube channels. They'd end up starting filming at around 11 a.m. They'd go till 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. Then they'd go to sleep for a few hours and have to get up for some schooling at 6 a.m. and then start filming again at 11 a.m. Now, a lot of them started to not like this, of course, and some of the parents were having issues and started to pull the kids out of the squad. Tiffany was also obsessed at this time with cleaning. They actually had something like 36 cats, and she was making these kids do all the work in the home. So they were having to bleach everything and clean everything during their off time, and it was absolutely exhausting. Tiffany also wanted to start filming more risque content. She would film them being mean girls to each other, film questionable content, and started making the clothes a little more sexy, even though they were just 11 and 12 years old. Tiffany was also being extremely inappropriate with one of the squad members, Gavin. She would flirt with him and say completely inappropriate comments to him. Now, Corinne was going home to her mother, being extremely upset with what was happening on set and crying, and her mother eventually pulled her out. As soon as Corinne left, Tiffany made it extremely clear that everyone was supposed to ostracize Corinne. No one was allowed to speak to her ever again. In 2019, the squad became just 4 members: Piper, Sophie, Sawyer, and Gavin. And then Frank the Pug got added. Now, Frank the Pug was a real dog, and Tiffany, the mother, would be the voice for the dog. She would hold the dog and make its arm move, be off camera, and be talking for the dog, saying completely inappropriate things to the kids and actually mean content. Things continued to get worse, and what ended up happening is Tiffany started to jump on the trend of crushes. She knew that young kids loved seeing when other people had crushes. So she started making ships, which were fake relationships where she would pair up a girl and a boy and pretend that they were a couple. Tiffany had Gavin and Piper hook up and pretend they were a couple, and things just kept getting more uncomfortable, and Gavin eventually ended up leaving the squad. Tiffany couldn't have this. She couldn't have Piper without a boyfriend, so she recruited another member, and it ended up being Walker. So now Walker was Piper's new boyfriend. She also recruited Hayden, Lev, and Jensen was now Sophie's boyfriend, and they ended up crushing on each other in real life. It was probably one of the only authentic relationships on this YouTube channel. 2020 was a bad year all around, but especially for this squad. What ended up happening is that kids were all secluded in their homes and they had nothing else to do but watch YouTube videos. So their channel took off even more, and Tiffany got even crazier. Claire was recruited onto the show. She had a boyfriend, Aiden. They also recruited Connor at this time. So they had a bigger squad again. And Tiffany started making different rules. Like the parents weren't going to be allowed in the house when they were filming, and they had to stay outside. They were doing a lot of prank videos at this point, and some of them were getting really out of hand, to the point where someone actually reported them to CPS, and they had a worker come and check on the home. Of course, Tiffany got them all to lie, and nothing happened from it. Sophie and her mother had actually moved in with Piper and Tiffany, and Sophie's mother was huge in getting all of their outfits and clothing, but she wasn't buying clothes that were risque enough for Tiffany's liking, so Tiffany fired her from that job. Now, at one point, Sophie's cell phone mysteriously goes missing, and Tiffany gets her new one, but she uploads it and starts reading all of Sophie's messages. She sees a message from Sophie to her mother saying that she wishes that they could just adopt Piper and get out, and Tiffany lost her mind. At this point, Tiffany and Hunter were controlling everything, all the brand deals, all the money. They were telling the kids, you wear this and you'll get the brand deal. So what she ended up doing to Sophie's mom is she said, you have to give up your parental rights to Sophie and sign them over to me. And this is when Sophie and her mother finally chose to leave. In March of 2021, Sawyer and his family had had enough, and they decided to pull Sawyer. And Claire at this point decides to stand up to Tiffany for something and gets called nasty words. Her mother finds out, and so she's pulled off as well. Piper decides at this point to make a video talking about all the kids that have left the squad, and decides to go on and unfollow each of them on camera. This caused a huge wave of hate for all of the kids that had left the squad. In January of 2022, 11 of the squad members who had left and their families filed a civil lawsuit against Tiffany. Now, the complaint alleged that the plaintiffs weren't compensated for their time collaborating with Piper, and that they were subject to inappropriate, offensive, and abusive treatment, including wildly offensive and sexually explicit comments. Tiffany tried to countersue for like $30 million, but quickly dropped that. And in October of 2024, she settled for $2 million. Tiffany has always denied these claims, and Piper actually issued a statement to People magazine after the lawsuit was settled, saying that the whole experience was extremely painful and honestly hard to understand. Not just because of the people making ridiculous claims about me and my family, but also how the media has been. It's become impossible to even look at my phone or do normal day-to-day things. It's been so incredibly painful. Thank goodness for my family, and thank goodness this is finally behind us. Tiffany continues to film Piper to this day, including a new, what I think is fake boyfriend named Capri. She's also had Piper do some videos at the Bop House, and the girls there are known for their OF accounts, which makes me think now that Piper's almost 18, Tiffany's got some plans in mind.